Hi, this is Stephen Helpling, and you're watching Voices of Indy.
Bad boys, they end up leaving, and little girls they never know why. Why?
Welcome back to Voices of Indy. We are just excited. I say we, it's me. But, we are excited, the royal we, are excited to have this week's guest is Stephen Helpling, easily one of the most talented guitar players, I believe, not just that I've seen, but here in the city of Indianapolis in general, and quite possibly the state of Indiana. I mean, Stephen, thank you for being on the show.
Hey, it's an honor to be here.
And I'm so happy you could, and I'm not joking when I say that. I'm not trying to float your boat. I think you and Paul Holland are two of my favorite guitar players here in town, and I have a clip that I'm probably going to show later in the show of you two just jamming out, like a total free-for-all that was recorded after when you played the Coffee, Comedy, and Music series earlier this year, and he just happened to show up, and just you two just like pulled out guitars, and after the show was done, and just jammed. It was amazing.
It's nice to run into people that speak the same language. That's all I can say. Because for me, it's just a conversation.
Yeah,
that's with any instrument. It could be drums, it could be bass, guitar, keys. It's about having a conversation and just kind of chasing each other around, a little cat and mouse, and just, oh, I know this, do you know that? And we're not even speaking, it's just, I'm going to play a little bit of this to see if he catches this.
Yeah.
And
well, what's kind of cool is I was looking back at the video this morning, and just to kind of, each of you were kind of catching glimpses of where each of you were, like on the fretboard, and just to kind of keep going. And I know I didn't get everything. You guys probably played for like 5 minutes without stopping. Yeah, basically, literally, until they kicked us out. And it was, you don't come across that, I think, very often. So it was just a really kind of cool spur of the moment, show off the talent kind of thing. Although it really wasn't meant to show off. You were, like you said, it was a conversation.
No, it's the beginning of a relationship and a friendship, if you will, because, I mean, we still DM on Instagram once in a while, and that's really what it is. It's not a, I'll show you mine if you show me yours type thing. It's more of a, oh, you're still jamming? Here, I want to jam with you. It's really, I feel like all musicians are constantly looking for some sort of connection, not necessarily validation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of musicians that could care less what people think of them.
Sure.
It's more or less about just, I don't really get to hang out with musicians because I'm busy.
Yeah.
You do the gig, you go home, you do your laundry, you mow the lawn.
Yeah, you're a parent too.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you got life outside of music.
Exactly, and this is what I talked with Kenny Phelps about too. There's a lot of balance involved with that, and a lot of times a musician will just want to pack up and go home, and I'm always for the love of the game, It's not a job to me, it's my life, it's my passion, it's what I do. And for me, it's just always, take that extra 5 minutes to go talk to a kid who wants, maybe they have some questions about the guitar, or maybe there's a musician, hey, my stuff's still out, like, let's get a quick little 5 minutes in, and that really means the world to me when people take the extra time to just hang out with you like that.
I mean, I got to admit, I'm not anywhere near the guitar player you are. I mean, I am just rhythm. So when I see people like you and Paul, I mean, one, I get intimidated because it's just like, wow, they know what they're doing. And, you know, it's just like, I know chords. You know, I took lessons, but, you know, I never really got into theory and all that stuff. And I remember having a guest on last week who went to Anderson University for music business, and he was talking about how he had to take music theory and how that has really kind of informed how he approaches his style of music, which is folk. But it's allowed him to kind of expand on it from a degree that, you know, folk can sound simple, but he's able to still keep it, you know, he's like, his chord charts will still look simple, but he's able to just add a little bit of...
It's all about the voicings, right?
Exactly.
And that's really funny, you know, I mean, I graduated from AU with a degree in music business as well.
Okay.
So I got my first guitar at the age of 9. And before that, my mom had an old 60s, you know, beat up little toy guitar. And it had 2 strings on it, and I was just trying to tune them. And if we get all 6 strings on this, I'm going to be the best guitar player alive. You know, you're 8 years old.
Yeah, sure,
you know? And I was messing around with that. Christmas came around, and I got Guitar Hero. I'm a product of the Guitar Hero generation.
All right.
And by the time April came around, which was for my 9th birthday, I had already worn a hole in the strum bar. It was the original Guitar Hero, so like the SG with the white pick guard. That strum bar had a hole in it.
Nice.
And I got like a little like Strat copy, like a red Strat copy.
Yeah.
And I kind of went from there. I taught myself.
Really?
But I'm trying to think. I think I took lessons for about a month, like for piano and guitar. But it was always like, well, teach me this song or that song. And I just didn't have the discipline to sit down and digest the information on somebody else's terms at that time.
Yeah.
I was always really just following the dopamine, following the serotonin, the joy of making noise and expressing myself. And yeah, I taught myself all the way up through via a little bit YouTube. You know, I was a big Eddie Van Halen fan as a kid. So I was like, major scales and modes, who needs that? I'm going to learn how to tap. I'm going to learn how to play Hot for Teacher, you know? And that kind of, I did a little bit of the YouTube thing, but I akin my development to more of some of the old heads, some of the guys maybe in the 60s through the 90s, you know, that were like, all right, let's rewind the tape, let's rewind the record, the CD. Well, how did they do that? And because of that, I never was worried about playing exactly like the record. I was always trying to get as close as I could, but because of that, I informed my own voice on my instrument.
That is very true. I mean, you have a certain style that is what I would call unique to yourself, but you can hear the influences in it. Like, I can hear Steely Dan coming out of your guitar a little bit. And other kind of rockers from that era.
Oh, of course.
And it's interesting because, you know, you're a young guy. And like you said, you're from the Guitar Hero generation.
Of course.
So, you know, you're not necessarily thinking that, you know, of the Steely Dans. You're a fan of the Eddie Van Halen's on Guitar Hero just because he truly is a guitar hero, or was, rest in peace. But you can't ignore some of the insane work that was done on albums like Asia or...
No, not at all. You can't. And honestly... my dad, this is one of those stories I always say, and this is why I'm doing a Steely Dan tune at my upcoming show at the Jazz Kitchen September 4th. That was my dad's favorite band. So
really?
Growing up as a kid, I was always listening to all sorts of music. We would have those live DVDs back when DVDs were a thing. And at the height, you know, he had these humongous wooden speakers and everything hooked up to the DVD player, and we would listen to, like, Sting when he would pull out Branford Marsalis and all those people. Some of those old classic live DVDs, or Fleetwood Mac, the dance, like Live the Dance or whatever. And
any Chicago?
Yes, he was a trumpet player, actually.
Okay, all right.
He taught himself saxophone, so...
And of course, when we talk about Chicago, we're talking about early Chicago.
Early Chicago.
Yeah.
The pre-David Foster Chicago.
Yes.
So yeah, that was always prevalent. I had a lot of different influences because I would just listen to what my dad would listen to. He was born in 1964, so he was a product of his generation, and therefore I'm a product of his generation.
Yeah.
Because that's the stuff that really spoke to me. But I didn't even like Steely Dan as a kid growing up, but he would make a big thing of fried chicken and mashed potatoes and gravy, and he'd have the box set, the Steely Dan box set. Wow. So he'd have his little CD player in the kitchen, and we would have Your Gold Teeth 2 on. His favorite album was Asia, his favorite song was Asia, and he'd sit me down and be like, I'd be like, Dad, it's 9:30 at night, I want to go play PlayStation. And he's like, no, do you hear that marimba? Do you hear the marimba right here? Listen to that drum solo. What's this? What's that?
Yeah.
He was teaching me how to listen, to listen to the music and find those parts that are hidden underneath. And it really informed my ability to be creative and be a producer.
Well, that seems to have also influenced, again, kind of the way that you approach music from a writing perspective. And because you, like I said, you could hear those influences in a lot of your music, but it's still, when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's Stephen Helpling.
Man, that's the highest compliment that anyone can give. You always are trying to find your voice. You know, I've been through a metamorphosis over specifically the last year or so. I'm kind of starting to piece together myself and what I want to convey in my music, because when I first released my first project back in 2018, I wrote most of that stuff like my second semester of college ever, like my freshman year on. And then we recorded and did it. And I was really influenced. Of course, I always really enjoyed John Mayer, because after the Eddie Van Halen thing, I realized I couldn't play like Ed, number one.
Sure.
And number two, I realized that I couldn't make any money doing that either. And I realized the next thing is okay, I really like John, because John is a guitar hero, a modern day guitar hero that has a lot of chops and a lot of taste, but still rooted in the old stuff, the B.B. King, the Albert King, the Clapton, the Hendrix, a lot of those things that I really liked, but he's playing those licks over pop songs. He's melding the two together. So that was my big moment. I was like, okay, this is what makes sense. I want to be the guitar hero. I want to play guitar and incorporate that into what I'm doing. But how do you do that in a way that reaches people? And it's really accessible.
Yeah, I mean, that is. I mean, you really decided to go down a route that did not make it easy on yourself. I mean, to go from Eddie Van Halen to John Mayer. I mean, seriously, how can we step up the levels of difficulty anymore? I mean, but you're right that Mayer comes at it from a kind of a different perspective, but yet still brings that amazing skill. Yeah, like you said, a modern day guitar hero.
I think what happened is John introduced me to soul. Not necessarily the genre.
Sure.
But being able to feel every note that comes out of your guitar, or however your voice is. Maybe you're not singing it the same way every single time, but every time it still sounds good. It sounds like it could be a take.
Yes.
When you're in the studio and you're listening back.
Yes.
And from there, I caught that bug, and by the time I was like a senior in high school, I was really starting to get into R&B. I discovered D'Angelo, thank God.
Oh yeah, no, that's...
You know, and then in college, I got into the gospel choir. I played for them. I got into the R&B and hip hop scene there as well, and that informed a big chunk of my career. I owe to just stumbling upon this community and this style of music, and I felt like I belonged. I felt like instantly, this is for me. This makes sense to me. But with how we started and everything, and I was talking about when I started in college and was releasing my first project, I was really interested in the 1975 at the time. Because they were big right then.
Sure,
I liked synthesizers, and I liked the 80s music too. And I wanted to mix that with John Mayer with singer-songwriter stuff.
Yeah,
and that's where I
makes a lot of
started.
sense. Yeah.
That's why you hear the vintage Junos in there, the Juno synths and everything, and the lush harmonies and the crazy reverb and everything.
That you do. I mean, that makes a lot of sense from what you're talking about.
But then after that, though, I started digging back. I'm working full-time as a musician in the R&B gospel community, and it's impossible for that not to just become a part of your DNA because of just how unique and how much energy there is with that stuff. And so the next writing period, after I released my more pop stuff, I was like, okay, I need to go back to my Steely Dan and my Doobie Brothers and my Michael McDonald roots and that late 70s, early 80s kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of went through a period of writing, like with We'll Find a Way and Sanctuary and No Controller, that kind of reflected that. But I realized that I was trying to fit my voice into a particular genre, and I wasn't making the genres fit my voice.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
So for me, I realized there's a couple songs I haven't released. I will release them eventually. I had a whole pop EP written, but I was simultaneously writing a rock project, a lot of rock songs, akin to like Tom Petty and Fleetwood Mac and Hendrix and a lot of those classic things. And I just kind of realized live when I do more of the soulful rock thing versus trying to do R&B stuff, it translated with the audience. I was able to connect with the audience and try to give them this energy that I'm wanting to give them, this positive vibe.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at. It's just you're always trying to fine-tune your voice and what you're doing, and I feel like I'm closer now to being my most authentic self than I ever have.
Nice.
Instead of being influenced by my influences or my environment, I'm very specific about what I want to do. And if I want to pull in some influences, I can, but I'm finally starting to come into my own as a musician and an artist, and I know what I have and what I bring to the table and what I want to say.
Now that's beautiful.
Thank you.
And two, I get that. I feel like, coming into music late for myself, that first album, I think, is like for everybody else who is writing music, that first album is going to reflect all those kinds of past influences. And it's all of a sudden like, oh yeah, they sound like this, they sound like this. When you're like, okay, but that was my first album, I'm really trying to find my own way now. And to be able to pull from these different areas, and not just from like two or three, you're like pulling from so many multiple genres that I think it's like, when you go back to that working with gospel and hip hop and soul and stuff like that you mentioned before, it makes me think back to the guy that you're going to be covering next week, Michael McDonald, who has that who's kind of like worked his way into that field, so to speak, where it's like, he is the kind of artist who has that gospel feel, that R&B feel, that hip. I mean,
it's hard not to when you grew up listening to Motown. I mean, that's why he put out that Motown album in the early 2000s that he won a Grammy for, I believe. Yeah. It's hard to not, when you're exposed to really good music, it's hard not to just kind of absorb it. It's not like, oh, I'm going to make a Motown song, or oh, I'm going to do this type of song. It's just a culmination of your listening experiences.
Well, and what I love about him is that, like, other artists were drawn to him. I think my first exposure to Michael McDonald, so my brother's 10 years older than me. He was born in '67. So I have a lot of that. Like, he was making me mixtapes to educate me. It had the Steely Dan. It had the Crosby, Stills and Nash and the Doobie Brothers.
Teach your children well.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and my parents were not giving me that. My parents were very much of the classical and
any big band. Any jazz?
Oh yeah. So I got big band and jazz from my dad.
My grandparents were really into the big band and the early 50s, Sinatra and some bebop,
Yeah, we definitely had Sinatra and Tony Bennett and, playing in the house. We had, we probably didn't have as much of more like the swing style. Not that it wasn't appreciated, but, I think that for me, I grew up playing, the first instrument that I was fully enveloped in was the trumpet.
I play trumpet too.
All right.
I used to anyway.
Yes. Yeah. So, but I mean, that means you're drawn to the sound. So it's like I still have a heart for ska. It's like when I was a teenager, I would listen to, I love the movie Swing Kids. Because the soundtrack was amazing to me. And it was all swing music. Both modern reinterpretations and some of that old school. Like you would hear some of the original tracks that, were popular in the 40s, late 30s, early 40s. And so that, that kind of had an influence on me. It didn't make its way into my music, unfortunately. Although one of these days, I hope to be able to pull out the trumpet for a track of mine.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, but it's just it's fun to have that kind of influence and to know that you can pull from that to a certain degree.
Oh, absolutely! It's one of those things where you write a song and then afterwards you're like, well, that's this song, and this song. There was a new song that I had recently written for this rock project I'm trying to put together for next year.
All right.
And I listened back. It had a wall of acoustic guitars. It had some slide guitar on it, some really nice tight drums, and some Rhodes. And I was like, this sounds like an America song with some George Harrison. It's kind of like that California, lush, thing. And I was like, but you don't realize that when you're writing it, because every chord progression you come up with, it sounds like a million other songs.
Sure. No, exactly.
What sets you apart is what voicings you use, and also what colors when you're in the computer or when you're tracking other instruments. What other colors are you gonna put in there? It's people always ask me, well, what's your favorite song to play, or what's your go-to this, your go-to that? That's like asking an artist, well, what's your favorite color to paint with? Well, I can't paint much with one color. I need a whole array. I need a palette, and that's really how it ends up being,
Yeah, no, I know for me, it's like I feel like I will get stuck in particular keys, and no. When I realize I'm in that key, even if I've capoed up, to tell myself, okay, I'm no longer in that key, but then I strum and no, I'm still in that key. And it's learning, it's learning to you're forcing yourself to learn how to play with, different notes and how to shape your voice, your literal voice around that, and make sure that you're not out of your comfort zone. Because I mean your vocal comfort zone. Because I know when I do that, things go awry.
And going back to kind of, me finding my voice and going through these influences, when I was younger, when I was doing that first project or, that first era of writing and being creative, I specifically was like, I don't want any songs in the same key. Yeah. So I made it a point, this is going to be something totally different. This is going to be something different. And I wanted every song to kind of feel like its own little world.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
Because you hear the sonic textures, it's cohesive, but what influences I'm pulling from, though, for the actual music, though, are totally different. And I've loosened up a little bit now. I'm like, well, how many songs, there's a gazillion popular songs from the 70s in this key, that key, this key. And those keys happen to fit my voice pretty well. I ended up, instead of me trying to, I just need to write a song in E flat, or what if I put this song in E flat, because I don't have a song on this project in E flat. I was thinking of it in a process of elimination, really. And I've kind of flipped the script on that. I'm like, I don't care if I have a couple songs in the key of A in the same project, if I have
Yeah.
10 songs, like, as long as they feel different and sound different, you need to figure out what keys work for your voice.
Yeah.
And then it's all about what seasonings you use on top of that to kind of change up the cook, if you will.
Yeah, I love the metaphors that you're using in terms of playing guitar is like having a conversation. Writing is like cooking. I mean, but it's all true.
Of course.
It's all true.
The world is moving a million miles a minute, and all these material things, there's no room for Jesus and let the politicians claim. Follow me, and this is the way of making us great again. Broken promises in the end. Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong? This is our home. Where do we go wrong? The kids look at the parents. What do they see? Separation, fighting, lying, battling for their custody. Dad says, sorry son, I can't be here. It wasn't my dream, it wasn't my plan. It's not the American I am. Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong? This is our home. Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong? This is our home. Where do we go wrong? Something's gotta change. Millennial age, between the poor and the race war, the political stage. Where do we go wrong? Something's gotta change. Millennial age, between the poor and the race war, the political stage. This is our home. Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong? This is our home. Where do we go wrong?
To kind of track back a little bit. You said you're doing a show at the Jazz Kitchen on like a tribute to Michael McDonald.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you get involved in that project? And secondly, like what's the preparation like for something like that?
So I've actually been at the Jazz Kitchen many a time, but usually as a player and not a singer.
Okay.
Within the R&B and gospel community, a lot of those artists and singers and stuff, they're in the Jazz Kitchen. They're doing a lot of that, and I've been very blessed to get those calls to go and do that and get familiar with the staff at the Jazz Kitchen and Valerie and Kenny Phelps. And eventually, I was on a gig. We were playing for Opal Staples. She just recently came through with John Mayer's guitarist, Isaiah Sharkey, a couple weeks ago. I'm really sad I missed it. But, yeah, we were just in the back, and we were in the green room before the second show, and I was just kind of just messing around, you know. I wasn't really all the way there in those rooms, you know, as a singer. I was just kind of, I sing, and you do a little something or whatever. And I was just messing around, and she ran with it. Do you want to sing with me tonight? And I'm like, okay. So we did Tennessee Whiskey just off the cuff.
Wow.
And that was my vocal debut at the Jazz Kitchen. And from there, with the response from the crowd and just how much fun it was and everything, that's how I got my shot, you know, to have my own show at the Jazz Kitchen. So last year in July, I did my debut Jazz Kitchen show, and I don't really get the opportunity to do a lot of work with background singers, but that was one of the first times in years that I had the ability to have background singers. And you just pull from the community that you work in, the pool of musicians and singers, and you bring people in. And we had a really good show, and from there it's like, okay, it's time to do another one. Val said, hey, you want to come do another one? And I said, well, I've got this idea for a Michael McDonald tribute. And she was like, okay, let's do it. And for me, it's like I'm trying to give the audience a glimpse into my childhood. My grandparents had a lake cottage up north in Columbia City. And there was always food on the grill. All the kids were making sandcastles or had a fishing pole or kayaking or doing something. And there was always like America, the Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, Tom Petty, Fleetwood Mac. That was the soundtrack of my childhood. Yeah. So I'm trying to give the audience just a little piece of what makes me me. And what's a big part of, just my musical development and my influences. So it's definitely a cookout type of set list.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Switching gears a bit, I'd love to get you sort of been talking about it, but what has been your experience been like within the Indianapolis music scene? I mean, like you said, you played the Jazz Kitchen, but you played the Hi-Fi. You've played a host of many different venues here around town. When I think of like the big names of the Indianapolis music scene, you're one of them that I think of.
Oh, you're gonna make me blush, man. I've only just begun. I've got a lot of work to do before I'm really in that conversation. But
I know, and to me, it's for me, it's like the Hi-Fi is like a bucket list place to play eventually.
Oh, absolutely.
But so it's like if you've played the Hi-Fi, I feel like you've kind of made it in town. But I think but names we've all heard. Joshua Powell. I think of these kinds of names, and you, of course, too. Of when I'm thinking of, if someone asked me about the Indianapolis music scene, what am I telling them? And so, but you're different than Joshua Powell. And that's the beautiful thing about the indie music scene right now, is that there's not a particular sound. It's all very unique. So, what has been your experience in finding your place and your niche in town?
I would say that the Indianapolis music community is really diverse, and it's more diverse than people sometimes give it credit for. And we're starting to have newer platforms shine a light on different artists in different ways. I just played a gig with Sleepy Floyd and Jet Santiago over at Treese. But at the same time, I've done the Mousetrap and the Hi-Fi. You do a lot of different things, and you sit in with a lot of different genres. We have a bustling hip-hop community. We have up-and-coming punk community. We've got a hard rock community. The R&B community is crazy. Like, it's so much fun to sit in all these different avenues. So it's kind of funny. I always thought Michael McDonald is an artist, but he's also a sideman. And the biggest thing that I can say is to be successful, at least for me to be successful, I've tried to find equity within the community. And that means I'm interested in all these different things. Who says I have to play guitar for only one genre? And there's a country community here too, and in the surrounding areas. With Christine Kindred, we had opened up for Travis Tritt down in southern Indiana.
Really?
Earlier this month.
Oh, very cool.
So it's just, I want my hands on all of these things because those things inspire me. Those people inspire me. So I would say the state of the Indianapolis music scene's up and coming. We're on the rise, and we have had talent for years, but it's been about creating platforms like this one to really shine a light on it. I feel like we need more platforms, we need more visibility, and more venues, and more people willing to just kind of open the doors for the next generation.
I completely agree. There are other avenues like Voices of Indy to a certain degree out there. Have you heard of the Select Few Sessions?
I don't know if I have.
So Bashir Assad has played Select Few.
Was that over at Indie String Theory?
Yes. So that's run by...
I recently, just because I was supposed to be on that with Bashiri, actually.
Okay.
But I had a scheduling conflict, unfortunately.
Okay. So that's run by Troy Freeman. And I remember meeting with Troy shortly after he started doing the Select Few Sessions. We got coffee at the Starbucks over on Capitol. And he's like, I just didn't know what was out there. And then I ran across your podcast. And, it's just like all these things. It's like, okay, great. We have other things. But then I remember doing when I did my interview with Joshua Powell, he's been around long enough that he's seen things come and go. And he's like, what are you in, like, at the time, he's like, what are you in, like, episode 5, 6? I was like, no, you're actually, like, 25. He's like, oh, so you've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
And you're going to be episode 64. So, I mean,
That's crazy.
It's there needs to be, I agree with you, there needs to be more outlets like this. And so I look at people like Troy and what he's doing, and I think that's outstanding. There are, Joe Shelton continues to do his, now I forgot the name of his. Yeah, I've just written everything. But he has his own
Put
series.
it in the description.
But I will put it in the description. And I'll actually probably put a link here. This is, again, I'm doing this as a reminder in editing to put the link to these guys' stuff. Joe Shelton has his thing that, hasn't been as consistent as it used to be. But he's based out in Greenfield.
Yeah.
And he's probably focusing more on Americana style of music.
Yeah.
And Americana country, that kind of vein of things. And
there's never been a better time to be Americana.
Right? No, seriously, it's so true. But there are so many different genres out there in Indianapolis that are really well represented by some incredible talent, but we need more outlets like Voices of Indy, like Select Few Sessions, and this kind of thing that shine a light on what is actually happening in Indianapolis and in surrounding communities. I mean, I've had people on the show from Fort Wayne, from Terre Haute and Bloomington, and we just have so much talent here.
I think a lot of things that both sides, whether it be the platforms or the venues or also the artist or even the audience, I think you need to realize that this isn't for the faint of heart. This is a labor of love. We live it, we breathe it, we think about it all the time, we do it all the time. And it's just trying to be consistent, trying to always just do something, continually pushing the ball forward. And the fact that I'm number 64 means you've been pushing the ball forward quite a lot, man.
I'm trying.
Eventually it catches on, and then you're a respected voice within the community because you've put in the work to build the relationships and shine a light on good people.
Yeah, well, that's my goal, is to shine a light on good people and shine a light on Indianapolis. I mean, that's why I call it Voices of Indy. Is to, if people are it's honestly, I kind of thought about it when I was setting this whole thing up. It's like, if people search Indianapolis, I want them to stumble across this podcast and see what we have here, or listen to what we have here.
Oh, on every single post on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, hashtag Indianapolis, hashtag Naptown, hashtag Indianapolis music, hashtag Naptown music. It's always I put those hashtags on everything, and I've definitely gotten some gigs to open up with some people before because they're like, I'm coming through to Indianapolis. And, a lot of people are trying to use Indianapolis as a connector between Chicago and Cincy or Nashville. And if they don't discover your platforms, then how are they going to know what's here? They've got to look through the hashtags and do it the old-fashioned way, right?
That's true.
And I've definitely gotten some gigs from just putting that in all of my posts, anything music related. So people are out there searching.
Good. It's good to know, because sometimes I wonder if hashtags are still worth it. But good to know that they still are.
Barely, but they are.
Barely, yeah.
The algorithm only algorithms sometimes.
That's true. So you're going to be playing a couple of tracks for us, including one that will appear on Patreon. Plug for Voices of Indy. Patreon, patreon.com/Voices of Indy. Check us out. We have plenty of different options. But what songs are you going to be playing for us today?
I'm going to do an unreleased song that has been a live staple called Where Do We Go Wrong? And I'm going to do 50 Reasons. I don't play that one out as much because it's an alternate tuning and you got to stop and tune your guitar.
Yeah.
It's from my first project and definitely has a little bit more of that James Bay, Fleetwood Mac, John Mayer thing to it. And the third song is going to be a wild card.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. So what kind of went into these songs? I want to talk to you a little bit about some of these tracks that, especially like, what was the driver behind your first track for us?
So with Where Do We Go Wrong, when I was in the process of writing for my first project, it was just one of those things where we've seen the continual just decay of our society a little bit, and I know that was pushed a little bit further. The envelope was pushed further with the pandemic, and I was just in college and I hadn't really lived yet, so I felt like I couldn't totally speak on certain things because I haven't lived those hardships at that point. But I was just like looking around and starting to see kind of where things were going. I was like, well, where did we go wrong? You know?
Yeah.
Like, what's up with all this negativity? It doesn't have to be this way. You know, and as a bright-eyed college kid, it's a very, I guess, a call to action, if you will. And there was that song and then The Awakening, which ended up making the record. And it was kind of a toss-up on which one we were going to put on the record. And my producer at the time, Jonathan Class, he's like, well, this one seems like it's a little more, I guess, uniting. It sounds like you can unite people with it. And Where Do We Go Wrong is like more of just kind of threading the veil, trying to get rid of the veil to just really take a look at what's going on.
Yeah.
And I always loved that song, and it didn't make it on that project, but it became a staple in live shows. We get to throw a little reggae in there. It had a really cool R&B reggae meets guitar player vibe.
Nice.
You know,
yeah.
and it's gonna be on the new project.
Excellent. I was going to ask. Is it?
That's why I've kept it around. I was like, you're gonna shine one of these days, little buddy. Just you wait.
Yeah.
Now with 50 Reasons, we've talked a lot about Joshua Powell in this podcast.
Yeah, we've talked about
that's for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua Powell, also an AU alum, was a mentor and kind of a big brother to me during that period of time, and he actually became a professor there.
I've heard that, yeah.
So he teaches songwriting and some touring and some different artistry type, courses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he was paid to tell me whether my stuff was good or not.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way, basically.
Sure.
And gave me the tools to succeed. So sometimes he would have these writing prompts.
Mm-hmm.
And me being a guitar player, I was like, well, I would put 10 different chords in a song, or it would just be too much for the words to sit on top.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a challenge to write a song with only 4 chords. Oh. And I came back and I said, well, I wrote one with 5. This is all you get. And that was how 50 Reasons came to be. I don't get to play a lot with experimental tunings or whatever. But I always come to find out, those experimental tunings or alternative tunings on the guitar can sometimes, they sound simple, but they're just so inspiring to play. It opens up a different world of thinking. And because when you're playing in an alternate tuning, you're not thinking of these complicated things. You're thinking of, I just need to make it sound good.
Exactly.
And that was how 50 Reasons started.
Awesome.
That was the ethos.
That's very cool. That's very cool, and it's also very cool to know that that first track is going to be making it, to see the light of day on an album. So, are you currently in the studio, or how do you go about recording?
It's really weird. It depends on the song and what the song calls for. I have my own home studio, but I also have access to a studio in Anderson called Grandview 765. My drummer, best friend, and co-collaborator, Lamira Norris, has a really dope home studio with a lot of outboard gear.
Nice.
He has his vintage organ there.
Nice.
His vintage Hammond, he's a church guy, so he knows how to rip on organ, and he's got his family heirloom Wurlitzer there. I've got my vintage Rhodes over there, and he's got his drum stuff. So between those places, that's really how it works. But I'll be at home in Logic, and I'll come up with an idea, and I'll just program it all on the computer. I'll go searching for sounds and just trying out different guitar parts, and putting down some bass, and the fake drummer or the virtual drummer in Logic is really good. And so once I get my template in there, then I kind of decide, well, what do I need to re-record? What stays? What goes? Because when you've got a musician like Lamira in your back pocket, it's kind of hard not to say, hey, buddy, I'm going to send you these files, or I'm going to come over with my hard drive.
Yeah.
Let's knock out keys and drums.
Yeah.
But I really like to do vocals over at Grandview. Okay. And between those different things, that's also how I went about producing Bashiri's most recent project that came out last year, too.
Really? Okay. That's very cool. I did not know that you produced that.
Yeah, it was really cool. I've done a lot of work with Bashiri as a guitar player, and it just kind of made sense. I don't know exactly what drew him to me. Maybe it was the music I'd been putting out, or just conversations, or maybe we just had a mutual musical and mental understanding.
Yeah.
But he came to me, and I immediately thought, okay, I can work with this, but I need Lamira. Lamira's my other guy. We're a two-headed monster, and we have a lot of natural checks and balances in the creative process. And we went about it. We spent basically a part of a summer and most of the fall of last year putting that together, and we debuted it at the Jazz Kitchen. It was really cool.
So cool. So cool. Well, Stephen, we've come to the end of the show. I thank you so much for your time. But
Thanks for having me.
I do want to say, or ask, because I try to, I'm not consistent in this, and I try to be consistent.
Yeah.
But for people who have been in the scene, for people who, are willing to take those risks in different genres, based on the experience that you have, what kind of advice would you give someone who is either trying to break into the scene or is just, learning, about an instrument?
I would say the main thing, I know that I have my own voice on the instrument, and I talked about previously about trying to get it as close to the record as possible, but I never quite did. Always try to play the record if someone brings you on to be a part of their show or their project or their band. That's the main thing. Even if you end up having your own little twist on it by accident, as long as you learn the music and take the time to prepare, that's got to be the biggest thing. You need to learn the music and be a good hang. Relationships are everything, and it's not like I'm gonna show up and show out to all these things just so I can brown nose my way into a gig. No, you have to lead with love and do things for the right reason. You gotta open yourself up to different possibilities, and you definitely have to have patience and good communication. Lord, we need more good communication in this industry.
Probably even within the town, within the city, and in terms of the scene, it's like communication is always key. That's going to make it for a better experience, make for a better scene, better for just everything in general.
I would say too, it is not a competition. Like, I feel like we have a lot of good players, but don't view it as a competition. You need to view it as we're all in this together, because if we're all simultaneously pushing platforms, doing shows, venues, and staying visible on social media, there should be more than enough gigs for everybody.
I agree. Now, I know we said we're at the end of the show. I do want your take on this, though. It feels like I'm hearing a lot lately, and it may just be because in many cases the scene is still recovering from the pandemic, especially the venues. What is your take on getting gigs? I mean, it feels like I hear people say, "Oh, it's so hard to get gigs," and for other people, it's not. And it's you have venues who don't respond, or I mean, what?
I think it's very, very artist or musician specific. I feel like we all have a very unique experience. Like for me, having a family at home, having my longtime girlfriend Liz and my daughter Jackie, and we have a home, and we just got a new puppy named Maxine to go along with our big boy Benny. And sometimes it's really, really hard to play for other people all the time, and then you're taking your kid to school, to dance, you're trying to do the dishes and mow the lawn, and then it's really hard to find the motivation to go send 30 cold call emails that most of them aren't even being hit back with you. I think the big thing is that's why I've preached equity within the community and developing those relationships in a genuine way, is because that is a much better way to have to get a gig, because you have people that are vouching for your quality of work and your quality of character. That's how I got into the hi-fi, the Jazz Kitchen, the Mousetrap. I've done some community events. I did All In Festival with Malingo, and that's...
Yes! We didn't even get to that. Yeah. That was so cool.
So that's pretty much it. It's all very unique, and you have to understand there are different types of gigs. There's a gig is usually something that's more of a monetary exchange for services, as where a show is a self-expression, an expression of who you are as a person and an artist. And the money and the art don't always line up. You have to have both to push the narrative and keep the ball moving forward. But at the same time, you have to understand that you're going to concede certain things. Like if you're at a bar on the north side, let's say I'm at Britain Tavern, they're not going to want to hear me talk about the state of our decaying economy.
No, they're not.
Even if it's a nice saucy jam, they're not going to be interested in that. They want to hear Freebird. They want to hear Rock With You. They want to hear Jack and Diane.
Yeah.
And you're going to be playing some stuff you normally wouldn't play to make a living.
Yeah.
But then when you're over on the other side, you have this chance to try to be seen, to try to make a connection. And I think the big key is trying to connect with your audience no matter what the venue or the platform is.
Yeah. Very good, very good. And we'll close on that. Thank you again, Stephen, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And honestly, it shouldn't have taken me 64 episodes to get you on. But I'm glad
you
to
were busy, man. It's okay.
I have had Malengo on the show, too. But
shout out to Johnny and the boys.
Oh yes, yes. What's funny is like I've had Malengo on, but it was only Johnny, John, and Sam.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that I've also had on John as a solo act, and then Sam was on recently with Limestone Nomad.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of cool to have. I say I don't have repeat guests. At least I try not to. Eventually I will, because there's just too much goodness going on, in my opinion. But I try to keep the swath wide open. And but sometimes you'll have people in multiple bands, and you just got to have them back on again. So Stephen Helpling, thank you so much again for being on this show. Stephen is going to be playing us out here. Is it the wild card? Is it another one of the tracks? We'll see. But
stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Called it wrapped around his finger. Some bad luck you drew. 'Cause girls that fall, they tend to linger, just like addicts do. Baby, just try. Figure it tomorrow. I just need you tonight. Gotta let him go. And I can give you 50 reasons on the right track, baby, I know. And bad boys, they end up leaving, and little girls, they never know why. Fatal wounds that never heal, the scars remain the same. Bad boys, they tend to vanish, refusing any blame. Baby, I know. You say that you need him, withdrawal starting to show. Gotta let him go. And I can give you 60 reasons on the right track, baby, I know. Bad boys, they end up leaving, and little girls, they never know why. Forsake heartache, you take back the love you make. Forsake heartache, you take back the love you made. And I can give you 50 reasons on the right track, baby, I know. Bad boys, they end up leaving, and little girls they never know. And I can give you 50 reasons on the right track, baby, I know. Bad boys, they end up leaving, and little girls they never know why.